one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, everybody may be seated. A roll call, please.
Copeland.
And here.
Black.
Here.
Honey. Gray.
Here.
Holtz.
Here.
Rouse.
Here. Okay, let the prayer show you do have a full council present this evening. Before we move to approve the agenda, move down the line to item 16, which is a reading of bill number 2054. We are going to table that for this evening. We're going to gather some more information from our pre-treatment coordinator, as well as our pre-treatment consultant, and then reconvene on that at a later date. So we will not worry about doing any readings of that bill this evening. With that being said, is there a motion to approve the agenda? Motion by Baus. Second by Holt. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Alrighty. This evening we do have our audit report for our annual financial audit. We have a representative from the firm here this evening. So ma'am, if you wouldn't mind, come on forward. And everybody has a audit packet in their big stack of paperwork you received this evening. And again, as we know, this is just our typical fiscal audit that we receive every single year. This is the final concluded audit for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. And if there's anything you would like to point out, add, or discuss with us, we'd be certainly happy to hear it.
My name is Tammy Alsop. I'm the partner in charge of the City of Cuba's financial statements, or their audit, I'm sorry. We did the audit this year, and we are going to also give the information, and we have been talking to the state auditor too. So she'll get a copy of our report, so she doesn't have to duplicate any of the information that we have. So she actually takes some of that information and uses it in her report, so she doesn't have to duplicate that. So we will look at the first report, and that's our independent auditor's report. That's the first report in the statement. On page 2 gives you our opinion, and that's the most important part of this statement that you would want to read. It's right in the middle of page 2. It says, in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the respective financial position of the governmental activities, the business type activities, each major fund, and aggregate remaining fund information of the city as of June 30, 2021, and the respective changes in financial position and, where applicable, cash flows thereof for the year then ended in accordance with the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So we call that an unmodified opinion. So that's the highest form of assurance that a city can receive on their financial statements. So that's very good. On page 3, it talks about the other reporting. We do a government auditing standards audit. So, but this year you didn't have to have a single audit because the city did not expend over $750,000 of federal funds. Now you might, maybe next year after all the ARPA money is coming through and all that, if you expend over $750,000 in federal funds in 1 year, in a fiscal year, you have to have a single audit. And what that is, that's just another part of the audit that you have to do that tests those federal funds to make sure that you spend those federal funds in the way you're supposed to be spending them. So we didn't have to do that this year. So that was a little bit different. On page 4, starts management discussion analysis. This is a short synopsis of what happened in the city during the year. It's, first of all, it starts out with the government-wide financial statements. That's the financial statements as if the whole city was on a for-profit basis. So it gives you all your capital assets, all your infrastructure of the city, and all the debt of the city. And I know that the city doesn't have any bonds that are governmental bonds, but we have the debt for the compensated absences and then governmental funds, and then the any other debt that you would have that would relate to that, such as if you had a net pension liability, which you do not have this year, or your pension actuarial. This year you actually have a net pension asset, and I'll show you where that is here in the audit report in a little bit. But So that's a little bit different. So you'll see in the highlights, you have the total assets and deferred outflows, exceeded its liabilities and deferred inflows for the year by $24.8 million. This is comprised of $17.6 million net investment of capital assets, and that's net of any related debt. $3 million of that is restricted for debt services and other purposes such as capital improvements, park and stormwater. Then you have $1 million that's unrestricted and available for governmental funds, and $2.8 million which is unrestricted for the business type funds. The business type funds are like electric, natural gas, and water. And then you'll see the next bullet, the total net position decreased by $379,000 from the prior year. Of this amount, $709,000 was an increase for the governmental funds, and $1 million was a decrease for the business type activities. I'll skip on down to the fourth bullet point there. The unassigned fund balance for the general fund was $994,000, or 31.6% of the total general fund expenditures for the year. Let's see. On page 6, this just gives you more information on the government-wide basis. I won't really go through that a whole lot. Page 7 gives you the statement of activities for the government-wide basis. The thing that changed on page 9, you see that you had the capital assets pretty well stayed about the same. They were $19 million in 20, and they went up to $19.05 in 21. And your long-term debt did change this year. It went from $2 million up to $3.4 million, and that had to do because of your electric. The electric pool that you're part of had a little problem, I think, this year with some of the utilities. So luckily, instead of making everyone pay it, they let all the entities that were in the pool have it as a non-interest-bearing loan over, I think it's, I can't remember how many years exactly.
Like 2
It's
years,
30.
I think.
How many?
2 years, I think.
2? I thought it was a little more than that.
Might be 3.
Okay.
No, Ms. Redson asked us when it was gonna end, and then I think it was next June.
Okay. I know they let you have an interest-free loan, which I think is good. Then you didn't have to come up with, $1.5 million all at one time. So I thought that was good. That is reflected in the statement, so that is part of the change in the loan really for that. So on page 11 is the full statement of the statement of net position. This gives you all your cash and investments. And again, this is on the government-wide basis, so this is if you are a for-profit entity. So you see you have your land, you have your infrastructure, your roads, your buildings, and then all the debt of the city is also on here. On page 12 is the program revenues for that, for the government-wide. And then on page 13 is what you're normally used to seeing is your balance sheet. And I like to look at the general fund because that's the one really you can spend on sort of whatever you want, but not really. But, the capital improvements, you have to spend that only on capital improvements. Airport, only spend it on airport. There's certain things in here you can only spend on what it's supposed to be spent for, of course. So I kind of focus more on the general fund because you have more lax with that. So you have the general fund, you have total assets of $1.1 million. Then you have total liabilities of $171,000. That left us a total fund balance of $994,000 in the general fund. So that's pretty good. Then on page 14 is the reconciliation. It takes the fund statements, what we were actually looking at, which is on the modified accrual basis. And and then have a reconciliation to bring them to the full accrual basis. So you take the fund balances of your governmental funds, you would add your capital assets, you would subtract any long-term liabilities, you would add your net pension asset, and that's how you would come up to the total net position for the governmental funds or the governmental activities. On page 15 is the statement of revenues and expenditures. had total revenues in the general fund of 1.1 million, had total expenditures of 3.1 million, and then we had total, other financing sources, which is a transfer in of 1.9 million. So that left us a negative change in fund balance of 86,000. So we went from 1 million down to 994,000 in the general fund. The next statement, again, gives you the reconciliation from the statement of revenues and expenditures to the statement of activities. On page 17, these are your proprietary funds or enterprise funds, or your business type funds, whatever you want to call them. It's, you have your electric, your waterworks, your natural gas there. So you see you had total current assets from all your enterprise funds of $5.1 million, total assets, we had $15.8 million. You had total liabilities of $4.4 million, leaving us a net position of $11 million in the enterprise funds. On page 18, this is the statement of revenues and expenses. So the first part is your operating revenues. You had $9.5 million in operating revenues. Operating expenses, you had $8.8 million. So you had a positive operating income of $657,000. You transferred out $1.7 million, so that left us with a negative change in fund balance of $1 million in the enterprise funds. On page 19 is the statement of cash flows. This statement actually tells you how the money came in during the year and what did you spend it on. And this is only for the enterprise funds. So you actually had receipts from customers. That's the first line of $9 million. You paid suppliers of $7.4 million, and then you paid your employees $884,000. And then also down in the middle, that left you to be able to purchase capital assets of $556,000 and actually pay off some of the long-term debt. Then starting on page 21 is the notes to the financial statements. There's not any big changes in the notes to the financial statements. I always like to say when you're looking at the notes on this, I like to look at note B on page 28. You have to make sure that your funds in the banks are FDIC insured, and if they're not FDIC insured, you have to make sure they're secured by collateral. And as of June 30th, they were all insured, entirely secured or collateralized with securities held by the pledging bank in the city's name. So that's good. That's what you always want to make sure is going to happen there. No change in the capital assets, really. On page 31 is note D is the long-term capital assets, and we talked about this. The only real difference there was that loan from the energy company, and you're right, Mayor, sorry, it was 60 months. Oh, that's 5 years.
Oh, okay.
5 years, sorry about that. I can't add today. Don't have my calculator, sorry. But, and it tells you that it's a no interest loan, and you had monthly payments of $37,000. So, the next note is the pension fund note. And then if you look on page 35, this is where I was talking about you went from a net pension liability, and it's kind of like in the middle of that page, the top one where it says the balance of June 30, 2021, you'll see that you had total net pension liability of $12.8 million, and then the planned fiduciary in that position had $11.3 million to take care of that $12 million, so you actually had a net pension liability of $1.4 million. Well, if you look at what happened during the year, net investment, and you wonder how that investment went up to $3.2 million. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? Especially when we're having such a bad year with all the interest and everything. But so if you look down at the bottom, you actually had a net pension asset. So you had more assets than you had liability, and that was $1.8 million. So hopefully, what that means is that you're going to see a decrease in the amount that you have to pay them to loggers. It doesn't affect anything for the loggers' valuation, or excuse me, it doesn't affect any of the benefits that are being paid to loggers or anything. This, it can just your valuation can change. If the valuation changes a little bit, that can make your percentage that you have to contribute just a little bit different. So hopefully this being an asset will make that go down. So, I didn't have anything else in the notes. You do have your budget to actual in the back, the information. Nothing really there. Everything looked good. We did have, and I think you know this too, we did have some problems with the bank statement, which we had also had kind of last year, and we thought we had that taken care of, but I don't think the company that was helping us with doing that with the software stayed helping us. I think they kind of dropped us last year, and I was kind of upset about that. Yeah.
It has all been.
Right, and I know it's been all taken care of now, which I was really happy because I think Chris actually got to the right person to help her, and then now it's all taken care of. And there was nothing wrong with it. It was just a timing issue of how things were on the bank reconciliation. It had nothing to do with any funds missing, anything in the wrong place. It had nothing to do with any of that. Okay? So everything was fine. And it was just, it didn't reconcile. And once she got in there with that person that finally with the software that could help, I mean, it's been reconciling. So I did want to note that because I think that is a big deal that all taken care of. So, and I want to thank Blaney and anybody who's still in the office there that helped. I know everybody helped and tried to get us a lot of information, and I do appreciate all their help. So, I know we worked with some of the public works people to get some information. So, I do want to thank them for all their help because everybody is really cordial. So they really help any way they can. So I do appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions?
So the long and short of it is, we're doing okay.
We're doing okay.
That's what we like to hear. So we definitely appreciate all of your efforts as well. Council, any questions? Thank you for coming and highlighting some of these important details, and I'm sure we'll dive into this a little bit more detail on our own, and if we have anything, we'll reach out.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet. Sure. With that being said, is there a motion to go ahead and approve the fiscal year ending in June 30th, 2021 audit findings? Motion by Honey. Second by Black. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Council. Before we move into an early executive session, we will hear some citizens' participation. Later on the agenda, we will have some discussion as far as park board goes. But before we get to that point, we do have a gentleman here this evening who is going to be gratefully volunteering his time to become a member of our Parks and Recreation Board. So Mr. Campbell, if you'd like to stand up. Bruce Campbell, we do have 3 current vacancies, 2 of which will be filled by Bruce and another individual who we'll discuss later since Bruce is here. So I'll let him stand up, introduce himself, and welcome him to our Parks and Recreation Board. We gave Commissioner Laney has your information so she can contact you about some upcoming meetings and events that we'll be having and get everybody on the same page. But thank you for letting Dave come and talk to you, and whether you asked him to or not, he did, and I guess he talked to you into joining the board.
He was a friend and very persuasive, and I know the help was needed, so here I am.
Well,
Glad to help.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Kimball. We certainly appreciate that. Lance, being in the voluntary board, we need a motion to accept his position to the board.
Yes.
So motion by Baus, second by Holt. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You're officially on Park and Rec board, Bruce, and you'll be hearing from us this week.
All right.
So thank you for that. Any other citizens' participation this evening? Yes, sir. So, Mr. Hudson, come on in.
Thank you. Paul Hudson, Hudson Funeral Home. Back on March 30th, we had an incident that occurred at our building. The city sewer backed up on our building. I wasn't there, I was out of town. And our and said that we had a problem, so, I told them, we'll get the shop back and take care of it, but it was way beyond that, so we called the city, I believe it was sometime early morning, and, no one showed up for a while, so we called back a couple hours later, by that time it was really that bad. It backed up on parking and flooded several areas of the funeral home. So when they did show up, they was able to do something, I don't know what it was, that caused it to go down through some of the manhole or something, I don't know exactly what that is. But, the city worker advised our help with probably should call Circle Bravo, so that's what happened. It's all done through cell phone, we out of town. And they came, and, done the cleanup, which was pretty expensive. And, then they sent us a bill for $3,116.48. And I'm asking the city if they would please pay that.
Okay, council, you hear, Mr. Hudson's case. Obviously, he had a sewer back up into his building. Sounds like our guys looked at it. I know our public work director at the time is no longer here with us, so we can't really get his advice on it. Kevin, I know you had his water sewer meeting. Probably talked to the sewer supervisor, got some more information from him.
Yeah, we had water sewer committee meeting, Jeff and I met with the supervisor. We feel that, top coding now, we might want to raise that riser. We do have a back flow you can put in, ADA system, and give them to people if they want to put them in, but we won't put them in. After having a conversation with the supervisor and all, we feel that the city of Cuba may have some liability, and I'll make a motion to pay that bill.
Okay.
I will make a second.
Okay, so the committee held a meeting, and it sounds like they have a motion to pay the bill.
Yeah.
I do know that the bill was submitted to MOPRM. MOPRM did deny the request from the insurance based on the information they received. However, I cannot speak to exactly what information MOPRM received because I know, again, we don't have all those employees here, and the supervisor, I think, offered more details to the scenario during that meeting. Is that correct?
Yes. He said that there's a good possibility that the city was liable for that.
If that is the case, it sounds like there might be a riser back there that's going to need to be raised to avoid this from happening in the future. I know, Mr. Hudson, you took notice of that as well, especially with some development near your property that could increase some of the water flow potentially. And then also, there was something else I was going to add to that. I forget. Getting that riser looked at is obviously something that we're going to have to do separate to this,
Right.
To avoid any.
I think the railroad has an issue with that ditch, that they need to probably clean out. I don't know if it's something to do that you all can work together with them, but there's gonna be a big problem when the coroner's office is constructed there. They're gonna go way back there, they're gonna build some tall walls, and so it's really gonna restrict that water from beyond the dam. It's gonna probably affect, the buildings before us, chiropractor, license bureau, and all that, and then back this way. I'm sure it's going to be a real problem for all of us. And I think the biggest problem there is that ditch. It's got trees and it's shallow, and when it rains, it's been heavy.
And that property is railroad's property.
That's
Is
my
an easement
understanding.
that they have there.
I understand.
Are they pretty much abandoned?
Man, they're not very communicative with, with the city on anything that we ask them for. I know that, but not saying that we can't reach out to them and see if they have a plan or a solution. I know we've had to reach out to them in the past and not had a whole lot of luck.
The sewer department supervisor said that they will provide a backflow preventer to you, that you have to put it in, and they're going to correct the problem with the city.
Is that something any plumber I call can do? I'm not.
I would think so, yeah. It'll be on your actual private property, that's why we won't install it. It'll be on your lateral between the building and the main, and it's a backflow preventer to do exactly what it says, prevent backflow. And again, that's something that the city has historically provided for folks who needs it, we just don't do the install. strips. Yeah, they're pretty handy to have, and I think we actually recently just passed an ordinance for some commercial properties that they're a requirement, so. Anyway, we do have a motion on the floor, the first and second, to pay the Servpro bill for Hudson Funeral Home. Go ahead and take us your roll call vote, please.
Copeland,
Yes.
Lass,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Gray,
Yes.
Holmes, Bass.
Okay. So with that being said, council moves to go ahead and pay that bill for you, and then again, we'll get our water sewer department over there to look at our end and that riser and get that installed, and try to reach out to the road department as well.
Thank you all very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, sir. Is there anyone else here this evening for citizens participation?
Oh, sure.
Come on up, Mr. Edson.
Thank you.
Mr. Happel, thank you for being here tonight. Your name will be mentioned, unfortunately. Mr. Mayor, thank you for allowing me to speak for a few minutes. I wanted some clarification about what was said in the newspaper.
Okay.
Over that last meeting when we talked about the drug program that we have and how well that Mr. Happel is doing his job. And I do agree with that. I think you're doing a fine job with what you've been given to work with. But we all sat here and listened to Mr. Happel talk and explain to everybody here, with the exception of Mr. Baus, that he asked your advice on this whenever the debacle came up with this individual. And if there's one thing that I've learned about Mr. Happel is that he doesn't take a squirt in this town without conferring with the city council and the mayor when it comes to something this important. I don't think, and you kind of give the impression in the newspaper that he made that decision on his own. Matter of fact, you even went to the extent of saying that I did not direct Mr. Happel to take that direction, if you will. Is that still your position?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So I found out about that after the fact, and to go through this again for you one more time. Whenever I became aware from the employee that the individual was uninterested in using that testing facility, sure. My advice was pick another one, go to another one, right? Because I'm sure there's more than one that we can use.
Another facility or
Another facility.
Okay.
Yeah, I said choose another facility.
If we cross the line. I don't
Yeah, well, Lance was included, a carbon copied on that email, so choose another facility, okay? And that's kind of where I thought it left off and what was likely what took place. A few days later, I believe after the weekend was over, learned that Jimmy was able to use his authority to institute the substitute scenario, which he did use. Cleared it with his auditors, this, that, and the other. But did I direct him to do that? No, I did not. I didn't even know it was an option. I learned that that's how it happened after the fact. I told the individual just to go to a separate testing site and take their test.
Okay.
That did not happen. Instead, the substitute was
The alternate was used.
Absolutely.
No. Okay. No, I understand that. As much as we talked about that particular deal, I think we still determined that there was some questions about, are we going to come up with an alternate test site in case something like this happens? Is that even possible? And it kind of dismays me if I figure out or see that there's nothing on the agenda about this.
So there was going to be. Lance has not been able to receive the copy of the contract.
I just want to update you
Go
guys.
ahead.
So,
We haven't forgot about it, Dan.
no,
I'm just going by what the agenda tells me, Mr. Mayor. I'm questioning that.
we had requested if there was a contract that was already in use from the current facility. They do not have one, so I'm gonna have to come up with something. Every municipality, for any bills that come in over a certain amount, are required to have a contract. I haven't gotten enough information to create a contract yet. So that was part of what I was gonna talk to Jimmy about tonight, as well as notify the council. There is no standard contract. They don't have a contract that they're using. So I will have to draft one, and then when we do, the contract is ready and approved by both parties, I'll do an ordinance that authorizes the mayor to enter into that contract. We just we gotta figure out some of the details to draft the contract. It won't take very long, but, I was out a couple of days last week, so it didn't move as fast as I intended for. That's fine.
And also, I think to maybe answer one of your other questions, Dan, there is gonna be some language in the new ordinance. Yes, we're gonna have that contract with that first collection company for business hours and some of the things we discussed. But there will also be some language where if that site is not available for whatever reason, there will be an alternate site to be used during those working
It's
hours.
approved by the state.
Absolutely, yes.
Because I know that the collection site doesn't test, other than temperature, you know, of the collection of the specimen.
Correct.
Everything else is sent to an approved lab, and then you get your response back from that lab. I mean, that's SOP for everybody. So, there was some question as to whether or not if you sent somebody somewhere else, that it would be, not accepted by the state, and that just seems a little silly. Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome.
That's all I need.
You got it.
Okay.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? Hearing none. Anybody else here for citizens participation this evening? Doesn't look like it, but you never know. Gary, you got anything to talk about for citizen participation? Hearing none.